How to eat the highest nutritional density diet when you're low on finance. Coming up. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Ernesto from Attaboy Cowboy, and on this channel we give you health and wealth tips to help you be more successful. Now today I'm filming in Havana, Cuba. You can probably tell from my face I'm all sunburned. And I'm here in front of this really nice castle, and I was thinking about something that I've been noticing the last few days. And I wanted to share with you how to eat the highest nutrient-dense diet when you're low on finances. So as you know, that we've had an embargo for a long time here on Cuba. So food is pretty scarce, and I've been observing the food that people eat that's for sale and what I see with the host families that I've been living with. What I see is that they eat a lot of rice. Rice is very inexpensive, and it's probably the most consumed food on the planet. That's what feeds most of the people in the world, aside from like sorghum and wheat. Rice is probably number one. Now, I'm looking at the development of the people, and I'm 6'2", I'm American, I tower over the people here. Obviously, a lot of that is genes. I have a lot of genes from Western Europe, but it also has to do with our diet, nutrient density. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. People talk about nutrient density, you know, they have limited funds. So what do you do when you want to eat the most diet? Well, let's compare and contrast rich countries to poor countries, and then we'll go over what foods you should eat. So basically, in rich countries, you have access to lots of food, right? We have an abundance, we're blessed. However, a lot of that food tends to be processed, which means it has a lot of preservatives, has a lot of sugar, has a lot of salt, has a lot more meat. It has a lot more things that are not real good for you. High glycemic index, which makes your sugar shoot up. And in poor countries, they tend to eat a lot more basic food. Like here, they typically eat a big bowl of rice. And yesterday, the family I was with, they were eating rice with shredded carrots, and that's it. When they have money, they eat a little bit of chicken or some other type of meat, but they don't eat very much of that. They usually just eat rice, and then when they can get it, they'll get beans because food is limited. How does that affect people? Well, in rich countries, and I'll talk about the United States since that's where I'm from, and that's where I treat the most, that's where I see all of my patients basically. So what we tend to see is we have the highest obesity rates, and we are amongst many countries. One of the highest obesity rates, we have the highest suicide rates, highest anxiety rates, highest rates of depression. What scientists have been finding is that wherever you live, the wealthier, more prosperous the country you are, the higher your rates of the incidence of suicide, depression, anxiety. Now, what causes that? Well, there's a lot of things that cause that, but definitely one of the factors that factors in is diet, the food that people are eating. People tend to eat, again, a lot more food that is processed. It has a lot more sugar, salt. They eat a lot more food that's packaged in plastics. They drink more bottled water, bottled beverages, and that introduces microplastics into your body. And what those microplastics do, they work as androgens. So they imitate hormones in your body, and they throw off your chemistry, your endocrine system. So what they've been finding is that in the developed world, pretty much everywhere in the world, even people like in the Amazon and stuff, 70% of people have plastic in their blood. In the developed world, every time someone has a bowel movement, they're finding 700 to 1,000 bits of microplastics in every stool. So that's definitely having a big impact. I see a lot of men at the clinics, the hospitals I work at, they have what they call bitch tits, but really they're just breasts. And a lot of that's caused because their estrogen levels are too high, and that's oftentimes caused by plastic and because of eating too much meat. Now remember, meats, chicken, fish, pork, beef, a lot of them have hormones and antibiotics in them because they're grown in close quarters. So how does that affect us? Well, what we found in research is that women or young ladies that grow up in areas where there's low income, like in inner cities, the average age of menstruation is around 13 years. That's because they're eating a lot more processed meat. Weenie, sausages, bologna. Meat that's more processed has much more chemicals in it. It tends to be the lowest quality meats. So it has higher percentages of hormones in it. And when you eat that meat, it transfers into your body and it affects you. And that's causing those women to have their menstrual cycles when they're around 13. Now in females, when they start their menstruation, generally that's when they stop growing. So that stunts their growth. Now, when you go to higher income areas, like let's say in Los Angeles, where there's people have access to better quality food, and they maybe meats that are better quality. They're not eating as much processed meats, but they're actually eating like chicken breast or an actual steak or a piece of fish or something. They don't have as many hormones in their body, so they tend to have their menstrual cycles at an older age, around 16, which means they're taller. So what you see in the U.S. is that the areas that are more affluent tend to be more Caucasian people. So they oftentimes are taller. In areas where there's not as much money, they're eating more processed food, you're going to have more minorities. And they're going to have their menstruations sooner, they're going to be shorter. They're not going to be as tall. All right? That's just what we're seeing in the science. Now, what's happening in developing worlds? Well, they tend to eat. I was just in Colombia last week and I'm in Cuba. They don't have the money for all that stuff, so they just don't eat a lot of meat. When they do eat it, it tends to be grass-fed, so it's actually much better quality. And they don't eat as much processed food as we do because they don't have the money to make industrialized meat like we do. So we can actually, in the United States, we're able to produce food at a scale that's one of the lowest on the planet. We can grow chicken and beef, pork, all that, much cheaper than most people in the world, just because we have all this corn, GMO corn, genetically modified corn that's easy and cheap to grow. We have all these hormones, we have a lot of antibiotics. We just have the science, we have all the know-how, how to make this stuff. So that's why we have more variety of food, not necessarily better, but more of it, abundance, okay? Now in poor countries like here, what happens? The people tend to be thinner, but they don't have the same issues we have. They have less health problems, less hypertension, less diabetes, less high cholesterol, all these different diseases. They don't have all that stuff because they're not eating as much as we are. They're not eating as much salt, they're not eating as much sugar, they're not eating as much meat as we do. They tend to eat more grains, fruits, vegetables, stuff like that. So actually, in these countries, they have a higher happiness index. The people tend to be higher in these low-income countries, much happier than they are in the rich countries. So you would think, wow, you have all this money, you can do whatever you want. Yeah, but that doesn't lead to more happiness, according to the research. People in these developed countries actually tend to be happier than us, and they have less health problems. They're thinner. Now, what I do see is they have less anxiety, less depression, less suicide, all that kind of stuff. And because they're poorer, they have to socialize more, so they have more social skills. They tend to have more people living in the houses. The host family I'm in, it's a 3-bedroom, and I'm with 6 people I'm living with. And they just had a party today, and they didn't really have any money. It was this guy's birthday, and they had a cake, and it was a really nice party. It was really cool. Everybody came over, they were laughing, they were talking, they were really just hanging out. It was really nice. Nice to see. When I walk outside, I see a lot of that. Now, in richer countries, you see less socialization. You see more people socially isolated, more people sitting at home, Netflix and chilling, and on their social media and stuff like that. People that spend more time on social media tend to have more rates of depression and all that kind of stuff because you're constantly comparing yourself to the people. You're seeing wow, they have this, they're doing that, and I'm not. So it's not real good for your psyche. So if you could limit your social media, that's good. The other thing is, I'll hear this from patients. They'll say, okay, doc, well, what about life expectancy? We in the developed world have longer life expectancy. That's correct, we do. But I want to point out something that's real interesting. If you look at fertility rates are dropping all across the world, but mostly in developed countries. United States and Europe, we have a negative population growth. Obviously, that's also due to social reasons. People are not getting married, and people are tending to be more isolated, all that kind of stuff. There's other factors, but the men do have more issues with fertility. They have lower sperm counts, and they tend to have more difficulty bearing children. And In developed worlds, they have higher fertility rates. They have positive growth. And that's why a lot of people are immigrating from developed countries to wealthy countries in Europe, United States, because we need the labor, we need people. So why do they have healthier and higher fertility rates? Well, because the people are healthier. They're not exposed to all the plastics, the hormones, antibiotics, all that kind of stuff. So they tend to be healthier. Fertility rate is a canary in the coal mine. It tells you how healthy the population is. When you see decreasing population and fertility rates, that's a sign that something's not right. People are not eating right. That's one of the main factors. Now, what about the life expectancy? Why do we live longer than in developed countries if we're not eating as healthy? Well, the reason is we have much more access to medications and advanced healthcare and healthcare professionals. The distribution of doctors to patients is much better in developed countries. You tend to have, let's say, 10,000 people for every doctor, whereas in a poor country like this, you might have 50 or 100,000 people for every doctor. So that the healthcare is much more scarce in these countries, so that tends to limit their life expectancy. It's not necessarily because of their eating habits, because they're eating much healthier than us. And you can see it when they're walking around. The people are thin, but they're healthier. Now, a lot of times I'll see patients that are overweight and they'll say, hey, how could this guy be malnourished? He weighs 200 pounds or 300 pounds. Well, that's a good point. Let's come on to the next point now. Let's talk about nutrient density, okay? As incomes start to drop, whether you're in a poor country or you're in a rich country, you're eating less because of inflation, which is happening right now. A lot of people are having to cut their diets down because they don't have the money. You have to look at nutrient density. That's basically the amount of vitamins you get per calorie, all right? So the higher the nutrients you get, that's a higher nutrient density. If you're not getting very little vitamins and minerals, it's a low nutrient density. So let me give you some examples, okay? Now, you see this in poor countries and rich countries. Someone goes to lunch like, man, I don't have much money. What am I gonna eat? I'm hungry. Well, they might grab a Coke and a bag of Doritos, and you eat that and you get full. I see school children eat that all the time. That's why a lot of them are so obese in the United States. They have the highest obesity index ever in the United States. The children in school age right now in the United States are the fattest Americans we've ever had, and it's happening like that in most industrial countries. So what you'll see is for $1 or $2, you can buy a bag of Doritos and a Coke, and you're full. And it has a lot of calories, but it also has a lot of sugar, salt, and nothing that you really need in your body. Basically, no vitamins, no minerals, okay? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of nutrient density. So in poorer countries, people can't afford that stuff. So they tend to eat more like rice, potatoes, wheat, vegetables, whatever they can get their hands on. Specifically here in Cuba, they don't have a lot of that stuff. I haven't really seen any Doritos. You can buy them. I've seen them in like tourist parts, and they have a Coca-Cola here. It's like a knockoff I've seen for sale in the tourist areas, but people don't typically drink that. They drink fruit juices. They get pineapple, they get guava, they grind it in water. I had that a few times today. And that has a lot higher nutrient density, so it's better for you. Okay, so what should you be eating then? Well, when you go into the market, think about how much money you have. You have limited funds. You want to get the most bang for your buck, all right? So the way I explain it to my patients, I tell them this. Look, let's just say you have $2,000 a month. You owe $1,000 for rent, $500 for your cell phone, your utilities, and maybe like $500 for food. If you go out and buy yourself, a brand new iPhone 14 for $1,000 or $2,000, you're not going to be able to pay your rent or buy your food and stuff. You're not going to do that unless you have some really deep credit cards, which I don't recommend either. So you want to live within your budget when you're working and spending your money every month. Otherwise, it's not going to be good at the end of the month. Same thing with nutrition. Every morning when you wake up, you basically have about 2,000 calories to spend. You want to spend it wisely. So if you go have a bacon cheeseburger, that's about 1,000 calories. That's not going to fill someone like me up having one bacon cheeseburger. I'm going to need like 5 or 6 for the day. So that's going to put me at 5,000 or 6,000 calories, like 3 times what I'm supposed to eat. I'm automatically going to become obese. What I see a lot with people that are lower income, working in the inner cities, stuff like that in Los Angeles, people tend to eat a lot of top ramen, noodles, like things that are like processed, like especially they start to eat more like bacon, sausage, really low quality meats that are made out of the worst cuts you can find. They sell them at the dollar stores and stuff like that. Corned beef, hash, like canned meats and stuff like that. That's all the stuff that has the most chemicals, the stuff that's going to raise your risk of cancer and has almost no nutritional value. So it's not real good for you. Now, what should you be eating? Well, just think of it this way. It's real simple. Whatever grows in a tree is typically a fruit. Those are high in vitamins, and also they're high in water. Okay, they have higher water content, usually around 90%. Let's talk about apples, oranges, things like that have mangoes. They have a lot more water, but they're still good for you. But they tend to have more sugar. Those are fruits. Now then, there's things that grow on the ground, broccoli, spinach. Those tend to be the highest nutrient density. Vegetables, okay? And basically, 1 teaspoon of vegetables, let's say like spinach, tends to be 10 times more nutrient dense than fruits. So in countries like in the Caribbean, South America, where they have really delicious fruit, people eat a lot of fruits, which is great. But they're not as nutrient dense as vegetables. You want to eat vegetables, they're 10 times more. So would you want to move into a place and pay 10 times more rent for what you're getting? No, you want to get your money's worth, all right? So when you're eating, get vegetables over fruits whenever you can. They tend to be about the same price, if not cheaper, and they have 10 times more nutrients. So you're going to get a lot more nutrients that way, whether you're in a rich or a poor country. Then you have things that grow underground, basically potatoes, carrots, garlic, onion, beets. Those are things like yams that are high in minerals because they have contact with the dirt. Now those are also high in nutrients, and they're recommended, they're good, because they're high in minerals. They're going to be a lot higher minerals typically than other stuff, even like vegetables. Vegetables are going to be the highest in vitamins because they're getting more sunlight, and you need sunlight to produce those in the plants. And the stuff that grows underground, it's going to be higher in minerals because they're sucking it right out of the earth. So you want to get a combination of fruits, vegetables, and things that grow underground, okay? But try to lean towards vegetables. Those are the highest nutrient density. Now, what are the things you want to avoid most? Of course, processed foods, processed meats. Those are things you want to avoid. Sugar, salt, vegetable oils, avoid them. You need oil, use coconut oil, or you use olive oil for finished foods, not for cooking. You put it on your salads, you add it to your food, etc. All right? Now, what about mass-produced foods that you have easily access to, like rice? I don't recommend rice. I try not to eat too much rice. It has a very low nutritional index, very low nutrient density. In developing countries, most people eat a lot of rice because they're used to it. It's very filling and it's tasty. It has a higher glycemic index. So when you eat it, it has sugar, it gives you a sugar rush. It feels good. That's why you see a lot of people eating rice. However, everywhere I go in the world, I see beans. And beans tend to cost about the same as rice. So if you have an option, eat beans. Beans are 10, 20 times more nutrient dense than rice. And you can get that anywhere. You can get that here, even in Cuba, they have access to beans. So if you're gonna pay the same, again, you wanna get your money's worth, eat beans. Beans are just above the ground. They have a combination. They're almost like between a vegetable and a tuber, like something that grows underground, like a tomato or a yam. They have a combination of all sorts of stuff, fruits of vitamins and minerals. Interesting thing is, a cup of pinto beans has more antioxidants than a cup of blueberries, just to give you an idea. So beans are very, very good for you. Chickpeas, black beans, garbanzo beans, lima beans, whatever, flava beans, whatever you have access to, just get a variety of them. Peas, all that stuff, navy beans. That's where you're gonna get your best bang for your buck. So one of the highest nutrient dense, lowest cost foods you can eat are beans. And they're awesome because they're dried, you can eat them year round, you can eat them in any weather. Now, another food that's really low in nutrient density and tends to cause a lot of problems in developed countries and poor countries are meats. Now, humans, we like eating meat. It's tasty, barbecue and fried chicken and fried fish and all that stuff. It's really good. No one's gonna deny that. But in terms of nutrition, very low nutrient density, okay? And patients will tell me sometimes, well, doc, what about this, how they say that humans develop their brain size from eating meat, back when we were cavemen and all that stuff. Well, that's a theory. There's no way to prove that. There were no scientists available at that time. But based on what we know now on nutrition, that was probably not likely. Of course, it added to them because, they were foragers, our ancestors. They ate whatever they could. If they couldn't eat, then they would die, right? So sometimes, like in the winter and stuff like that, you can't eat fruits and vegetables or, weeds or whatever they were eating. So they would hunt, they'd eat deer, so it kept them alive. So definitely, meat was very important in our evolution for keeping us alive and helping us to evolve. But comparing humans now to people, thousands of years ago, is not a fair comparison. We're very different creatures. We've evolved. If you look at those diagrams of, Abdul, can you add one in here, buddy? Of like a Neanderthal. It shows like the guy that's like a monkey, it turns into a human. All right, thanks, Jim. So over evolution, as we've evolved, we've also changed. And our bodies are different now. And we have access to better nutrition now. That's why people are living longer. Even in the Middle Ages, people would die in their teens. That was like 18 or 19 was the life expectancy in those days. It's not like that anymore. My life expectancy in the United States is 76 years old right now. Hopefully longer if I don't eat meats or processed foods and stuff like that. But everything has really changed. And one of the reasons why we're living longer is because of the abundance of food, but also the quality of foods. Now, the problem with meats is they're very low in nutrients. They don't have any vitamins. They may have a little bit of minerals, and what they have a lot of is protein. And protein is very important, but it has a low bioavailability, which means it takes a lot of work to extract that protein, and by the time you're done processing it, you're gonna get very little. Let's just give an example. Let's say you eat a steak that has about 40 grams of protein. By the time you're done digesting it, breaking it down, and extrapolating the protein, you might get like 8 grams out of it, okay? An eggs are actually really healthy. Eggs are good. They're one of the most nutritious things you could eat. One egg has 6 grams of protein. Once you're done breaking it down, digesting, you might get 5 grams out of that 6. Very efficient protein source. So you can eat 2 eggs and get more protein than you would out of a huge steak, okay? Now, if you put that steak in a calorimeter in a lab and break it down and everything, sure, they're gonna tell you it has 40 grams of protein in it, that's true. But can you actually absorb that? Not likely, most people can't. And what you're doing is you're causing wear and tear in your body. You increase your chances of diabetes, blood pressure, stroke, all that kind of stuff. Most of the major health problems that we get are caused by meats, processed food, sugar, and salt. That's it, okay? So another issue with meats is they tend to be expensive. A lot of times people have limited funds. They're like, well, I gotta have my meat, my steak, my pork, my fish, my chicken. So they'll sacrifice buying other stuff. I'll see that in poor countries like in Colombia or other parts of South America, Asia, or in Africa. When I travel there, some people are just used to eating meats and they feel like they have to get some meat. And if they don't, they're just not gonna eat well. They're gonna be unhealthy. That's just not true. You're not gonna get the majority of your nutrients out of meats, and that's not the way to eat the healthiest. So if you are low on funds, that's where you're gonna see people that have the highest malnutrition. Because what I'll see is people that are low on funds will get, let's say, a piece of chicken and they'll eat rice, and that's it. Well, rice is not real good for you. It doesn't have much nutrients. It's a high glycemic index. And then they're eating chicken, which is also low in nutrients. So that's not very nutritious. That's not gonna make you grow very tall. It's not gonna make you very smart. And that tends to affect children a lot. You have to keep that in perspective. So if you have children, they're developing. You wanna make sure they're eating the most nutrient-dense diets so they can reach their intellectual capacity and their physical capacity. You want them to grow as big and strong as possible and have the brains as big as they can so they can become engineers or professors or researchers or whatever they want to be. Now, if you're feeding them chicken or beef or pork or fish and then you don't have any money left and you're just buying rice, that's not a good strategy. You got to flip that around. Now, optimal nutrition, if you're gonna eat meats, which are not required anymore, you don't have to eat meats according to research to have optimal nutrition. Optimum is what fits in the palm of your hand. Not all the way to the tips of my fingers, just in the palm, this middle part. So in my case, it'd be about the size of a thigh, or 4 ounces, like one burger on a hamburger, one patty on a burger. You eat that every other day. So Monday, 1 piece, 4 ounces of, let's say, beef. Okay. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, a piece of fish. Then Thursday, nothing. Friday, a piece of pork. So every other day at one meal, not for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. One meal. That's ideal. If you're gonna eat meats, that's the ideal portion of meats you want to eat. Okay. You want to treat meat kind of like alcohol in some ways, where it's something you enjoy every once in a while, like a bottle of wine, but you don't eat it every day, or birthday cake, or something like that. Okay. It's not going to help you reach optimal nutrition. It's expensive. If you have limited funds, it's going to keep you from buying broccoli, spinach, yams, potatoes, carrots, all these other things that you need. Now, sometimes patients will say, well, doc, what about, I don't have a lot of money, so I'm eating a lot of potatoes. Those aren't real good for you. Well, there's good, and then there's bad, and there's best, right? Obviously, the best thing you eat are vegetables and legumes, like beans. But meats are not up there, okay? And potatoes are healthy for you. They're good for you. They do have a higher glycemic index, but they're good for you. I would not go eat rice or pasta or beef or chicken or fish instead of a potato. A potato is grown underground. It's full of minerals. So potatoes are very inexpensive. Especially like in the United States, I could buy like a 25-pound bag of potatoes for $3. I mean, it's amazing. Now, how you prepare the food is also very important. You don't want to fry your food. If you're gonna eat potatoes or anything else, cook them in a soup, bake them, something like that, but don't fry food. Frying causes carcinogens to form the food. So if you're gonna eat like French fries, for example, that's not good. And yes, you shouldn't eat that. You should just eat whatever else you're gonna eat, if that's your option. But if you want to eat baked, potato, like I like French fries, I just put them in the oven and I bake them. Or if you own an air fryer, you can air fry them. They'll come out just like French fries. I bake them, they come out crunchy, and I eat that. That's a high nutritional density. So again, you want to look at how you can substitute processed foods for foods that are not processed, foods that are whole foods. That's where the name of that market comes from. Just plain old carrots, plain old potatoes. Carrots are super inexpensive. Put carrots in everything. Sometimes I'll hear patients say, well, doc, vegetables are expensive. They're not. Processed food is much more expensive. It's much more expensive. You want to eat vegetables. If you're limited, eat carrots, eat onions, eat potatoes. That stuff is very inexpensive. Eat a lot of different beans. You can live off that. Give you everything you need. You'll be very healthy. So again, if you're low on money, don't sacrifice your diet by buying more processed food or processed meats. Yes, they are cheaper, but you're gonna pay the price. You're gonna end up with cancer, you're gonna have obesity, you're gonna have a lot of problems. Most people that have obesity are malnourished, very high percentages of it, because they'll eat things, as I mentioned earlier, like a Coke and a bag of Doritos instead of eating like a bowl of like vegetable soup or a baked potato or something like that. So you can easily eat inexpensive food by just eating whole foods, vegetables and beans and stuff like that, eggs. It's gonna be a lot more healthy. And notice I didn't mention dairy. Dairy gives you almost no benefits. It's not good for you. Cheese, milk, all that stuff. Of course, it tastes good. I eat a piece of pizza every once in a while, or cheese on my burgers whenever I eat veggie burgers. It tastes good, but it's something you eat very sparingly. You eat it maybe like once or twice a week, just like you would eat meat. So dairy, meats, you eat those very limited. Eggs are healthy. You can eat eggs every day, and they're not as expensive, and they're a very good protein source. Now, another thing is preparation. We mentioned that earlier. You want to prepare your foods, whether it's meat, vegetables, whatever, and water. That's the best way to preserve the vitamins and the minerals that are in them. When you cook meats on barbecues or you fry them or anything like that, it destroys the protein in it. So not only are you getting all the issues with the antibiotics, the hormones and all that, but you're not even giving the very little benefit that you could, which is the protein. The protein becomes denatured when it's exposed to extreme heat. Now, water tends to preserve the protein in it, so that's why soups are really good. If you're gonna eat beef soup with a lot of vegetables or chicken soup with a lot of vegetables, use a little bit of meat, lots of water, lots of vegetables. That's a good way to eat meats, and it'll preserve the protein in them. So I hope that helps. And from Havana, Cuba, this is Dr. Ernesto. Thank you. Goodbye.